Hey everyone, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Facebook because Facebook is a danger to public health according to a new report, and I'm pretty sure you guys know where I fall on this, on the opinion side. Now this is coming from the BBC, and I found this to be absolutely interesting. Now they are talking about a report from a group called Avaz, which actually conducted research that said that Facebook posed a major threat to public health. Now, for the record, and to be transparent here, I don't know much about Avaz or their possible biases other than they're sitting here being reported in the BBC. But I did go through their report and actually looked up their methodology, and this is what they used for the research. They identified 82 health misinformation spreading websites. They then identified 42 super spreader Facebook pages that most contributed basically to those websites' expansion onto Facebook. And then they estimated the total number of views for the global health misinformation networks. So for example, you take the 82 websites plus the 42 super spreader pages and on and on and on. Now, back to the BBC, because Avaz's report suggests that only 16% of health misinformation that it identified on Facebook actually carried a warning label. And I ran into this, I think it was actually yesterday, when I went to share something that was COVID-19 related, and I got a prompt before I was able to share that said, hey, click or tap here to learn more about COVID-19, check your source. The source, I believe, was Reuters, and it said Reuters has been around since blah, 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 blah. And so Facebook is trying to be proactive with some of this, but if they're only catching 16%, that's an obvious issue. Now, to put that in context, Facebook's official response to this report was to say, and I quote Facebook, "From April to June, we applied warning labels to 98 million pieces of COVID-19 misinformation and removed 7 million pieces of content that could lead to imminent harm." Now, if they had labeled or ID'd only 16% of the misinformation, that means that over 600 million posts were basically about COVID-19 misinformation or were possibly leading imminent harm, which means something like 500 million of these posts plus were not actually being labeled by Facebook. That's obviously a huge, huge issue. Now, here are some of the other interesting findings that this report had. The top 10 websites identified by researchers as spreading health misinformation had almost 4 times as many views on Facebook as information from official sites such as the World Health Organization, again, according to the report. A significant amount of health information was shared from public pages, and 42 of those pages were followed by more than 28 million people around the globe. Now, the type of content that the report highlighted included, and I've got numbers here, 8 million views for an article claiming that Bill Gates backed a polio vaccination that led to the paralysis of 500,000 children in India. 4.5 million views for an article containing basically a fake cure or bogus cures for deadly diseases like Ebola. 2.4 million views for an article claiming quarantine harmed public health. And the research looked at accounts from the UK, the US, France, Germany, and Italy to do this. Now, the Avaz campaign director, Fadi Quran, said, and I quote, "Facebook's algorithm is a major threat to public health. Mark Zuckerberg promised to provide reliable information during the pandemic, but his algorithm is sabotaging those efforts by driving many of the Facebook's 2.7 billion users to health misinformation spreading networks. This infodemic will make the pandemic worse unless Facebook detoxifies its algorithm and provides corrections to everybody exposed to these viral lies." Now, it's very easy to find Facebook, to find these groups, because basically Facebook's algorithm helps to prioritize this kind of information and then show it to people who are searching for similar topics. I personally have witnessed this, and so for example, I have been researching QAnon for upcoming articles and videos and all that kind of stuff, regarding that group. I usually do my research, obviously my homework, before I post these things, and so as I was going through various QAnon groups on Facebook, Facebook's algorithm was more than happy to point me to even more QAnon groups. And so if I was sitting there, let's say, fully believing in QAnon, they are going to bring me to more and more QAnon because their algorithm thinks, well, this guy is into QAnon, so let's give him more of that. That's what they're talking about here. Now, this is also true of benign searches as well. So if I'm searching on something innocuous, it will lead me there as well. But the example in the report uses a page, and I found this interesting, called Kate Shemirani, and she calls herself a natural nurse in a toxic world, and basically goes on to talk about her qualifications. But in fact, Ms. Shirani's nursing registration was actually suspended by the Nursing and Midwifery Council in the UK in July after complaints that she was spreading false information about COVID-19 and about vaccines. Actually, I don't know if it was in the UK. I believe it was, and I forgot to add that into my notes. But the Nursing and Midwifery Council in July of whatever country, I believe it was the UK, had actually suspended her license for spreading false information about COVID-19 and vaccines. Now, at a glance, what she is posting on Facebook and Twitter basically reveals things like attacks on Bill Gates, the wearing of masks and NHS staff, so it was the UK, that's the National Health Service, whom she calls criminals and liars for perpetuating the quote-unquote hoax that is the coronavirus. Now, much of her content, though, is on vaccines. So, for example, in the past week or so, she has claimed that the polio vaccine actually caused polio and has harmed and killed thousands of people. This basically was a serious issue that continued to spread. And so Avaz actually reached out to both Facebook and Twitter to ask if her post broke any of their rules. Twitter would not give a public statement, but it did say that its rules covered COVID-19 only, so it would not have been affected by a post claiming that polio vaccines were actually causing polio, which is demonstrably false per all available evidence in science. Facebook said that while it doesn't prevent people from saying things that are factually incorrect, it has acted to make this and similar posts less prominent in people's news feeds, possibly meaning that they are basically tuning their algorithms or trying to slow down the spread of this information, but it still exists. I think this is a huge problem, but I also think it's too late. And I'll be honest with you here, whether it's QAnon or anti-vaccination or whatever that is, and I'm not going to sit here and adjudicate whether any of these things are right and wrong. You can figure that out for yourself. This is what the report is showing you, is that when we have something that has misinformation and it spreads, and the algorithms of the platforms that we are using are spreading it for us, especially if it seems like it's catching on and going viral, which means it could be potentially more advertising revenue for Facebook and Twitter, that's a very serious problem that we have to combat. And at this point, whether we are talking about COVID-19 vaccinations, the election, interference, all that kind of stuff, we are now basically sitting on a whole bunch of misinformation. And there are people, thanks to confirmation bias, that will dig in and say, I don't care what you say, I am right. I don't care about your facts, even if you've got really good facts and a really good research. And that is a very serious problem that we have overall. And so by virtue of that, I can absolutely agree with the statement that Facebook is a danger to public health in the sense that it is oftentimes the birthplace, or at least spreading to millions of people, information that, quite frankly, shouldn't be out there or should be vetted to a much more stringent standard before people put things out there. It's a very serious problem that we have right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we combat this, because I don't see a way around this short of actually killing these pages and then everybody screams censorship as opposed to, let's say, doing it in the public interest. And I also understand that logic as well, because obviously nobody wants to give up here in the United States, their First Amendment right for that freedom of expression, no matter how right or wrong that expression is. And so that is, I think, the tricky road that we have here in the United States, and obviously other countries have their own problems with that as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please feel free to call me an idiot as usual, but, here we are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online and stop spreading misinformation. Thanks, guys.